Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. We're coming to you live from the CNN News18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio. In what is a special broadcast of Brass Tacks, we'll be having a full panel from CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry, on what exactly to look forward to in the Union Budget for 24-25. As the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will rise tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. to present her 7th consecutive budget, which is a record in itself. It is a budget unlike any other because it will be the first budget of the Modi government 3.0 and it will have to reflect the mandate of 2024. Voters have flagged concerns over economic growth, jobs and inflation. Clearly, India has a few good things going for it. It is the fastest growing major economy on the planet. The economic survey, which was tabled today in Parliament, has forecast GDP for FY25 at between 6.5% and 7%. Inflation is well within the RBI's upper end of 6%. But the biggest concern is the lack of jobs, and also more importantly, the lack of employable youth for those jobs. The survey says India has to create at least 78 lakh jobs every single year. We are far from it. What can the Finance Minister do to alleviate that concern? We'll be joined by a special CII panel. But first, what is this economic tightrope walk that Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister, will have to walk when she presents the Union Budget 24-25?
ये बजट अमृत काल का एक महत्वपूर्ण बजट है। हमें 5 साल का जो अवसर मिला है, आज का बजट हमारे उन 5 साल के कार्य की दिशा भी तय करेगा।
Sir, with your permission, I rise to lay on the table a copy each of the following papers, both in Hindi and English versions. Economic Survey 23-24, Economic Survey 23-24 Statistical Appendix.
Even high frequency indicators are telling us that the economy is carrying on the momentum that we have seen until the end of March 2024 when we grew at 8.2%.
All right, a little later on in the program, we'll be joined by the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran. He's, of course, one of the authors of the economic survey that was tabled today. And the big headline from that is the GDP figure of 6.5% to 7%. We'll ask him if that was a conservative estimate because the RBI, the IMF, other agencies have predicted India to be growing above 7%. And what are the red flags, particularly when it comes to job creation? But let's take you through first the key highlights of the economic survey that was tabled today by the Finance Minister in the Lok Sabha and in the Rajya Sabha. The growth projection, that's the big number. The survey projects growth for FY25 to be between 6.5% and 7%. That is in line with global estimates. In fact, some agencies, Moody's, Fitch, IMF, etc., are predicting on the upper end of that band at 7% or above. Inflation management, again, a critical factor in managing the economy. Retail inflation dipped to 5.4% in FY24. It is down from 6.7% in FY23. Again, that is well within the 4 to 6% range that has been given by the RBI. Foreign direct investment, it is still pretty resilient despite a slight decline. It's come down to under $46 billion. It's $45.8 billion in FY25. In FY23, it was slightly higher, just a shade under $2 billion higher at $47.6 billion in FY23. Then you have sectoral growth. Again, the survey, this is no big secret, but the survey predicts that services sector has grown by 7.6%. So there's a differential of anywhere between 1 to 0.5% between the GDP figure overall and what the survey is predicting for services sector growing at 7.6%. Agriculture expanded by 4.18% in the last 5 years gone by. Manufacturing, and this is where it's critical because if you need to create large-scale jobs for employable youth, you need to create that in manufacturing. Industrial growth is seen at 9.5% in FY24, I beg your pardon. The manufacturing sector rebound is expected after a legacy of what the survey calls bad loans. And a specific mention has been done in the survey about renewable energy, about how the survey is predicting that this sector alone will attract investments worth upwards of 30 lakh crores by the end of the decade. But it's not all hunky-dory, it's not a bed of roses. There are some very serious economic red flags that have been put out by the economic survey. There are challenges that the Modi government is going to face, some headwinds. The biggest, of course, is jobs. And the survey, at a conservative estimate, says that the government needs to generate, the Indian economy needs to generate 78.5 lakh jobs every single year. But that's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is 1 in 2 graduates, 50% of those who are graduating from college are not even readily employable. The slowdown of hyper-globalization is impacting industrial growth. That's the other key finding of the survey, which of course flags off a big global headwind. There's also the global supply chains being disrupted, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel-Hamas war, and of course COVID itself. Let's not forget, we're just 4 years out of COVID. Massive disruptions to global supply chains, and that is affecting most of all food prices. And as you know, when food prices go up, it's the people at the bottom end of the pyramid who are disproportionately affected. There's also, the survey says, a need for greater private sector investment in the infrastructure sector. We'll talk about how and why private sector investment is not catching up in the way that the government was hoping to. Also balancing energy security vis-a-vis the transition to renewable energy, and mapping job displacement because of the rise of artificial intelligence, which again is going to be a big talking point in the years ahead. So, first I want to go across to a special CII panel that is joining us tonight on Brass Tacks in this special Budget Eve broadcast. Sanjeev Puri is CII President. He's the Chairman and Managing Director of ITC. Chandrajit Banerjee is the Director General of CII. Mr. R. Mukundan is the CII Vice President and Managing Director and CEO of Tata Chemicals. And Vaishali Sinha is CII National Council, co-founder of Renew Power. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us. Let me start with you, Mr. Puri. The big headline figure from the economic survey table today is GDP growth rate estimate of 6.5% to 7%. Do you feel this is tempered down, and do you see any reason why this should be tempered down given the geopolitical risks that we're seeing around us?
Thank you. Yes, I think it's a little cautious, 6.5 to 7. As you know, RBI has recently, upped it from 7 to 7.2, and IMF has also gone from 6.8 to 7. So I think it's a little cautious, no harm in that. And, at CII, we believe that the potential is higher, given a number of positives this year. We do expect the global trade to move from negative territory to positive territory. We do expect agriculture sector to perform better. You were sharing this figure of about 4% 5-year average. So we are expecting it to be around that figure this year. We do expect services to be a little better this year. So all that gives us the potential to grow at a faster rate, assuming, of course, that the thrust on capex continues, the thrust on policy reforms continue, and there's no reason to believe it will not. And of course, we will also see the lagged impact of the benefit of all the investments that have happened in the economy, both the public and private capex coming in. So a lot of positives are in place. So I would be more optimistic than this, and that's also reflected in the CII internal surveys. Having said that, let me also recognize that the survey has also called out 2 risks which are fair to call out, and those are clearly monitorables. I think one is that of the external sector. One is, of course, the global the deglobalization trend, and also the risk from China dumping stocks at various places in the world. That is a risk, and we do have a mechanism in India to deal with it. But given the dynamic today, maybe it's time to rethink how it can be made even more effective. And the second risk, of course, is the one on climate change, because that, besides disrupting economic activity, it does cause a lot of distress in agriculture, and that pushes up inflation and therefore consumption. So those risks are fair to call out. Having said that, at this moment, based on what we are seeing, the narrative and the projections that we are seeing from various places, we are optimistic and we believe it should be, potentially we should be looking at something like an 8%.
Okay. Let me ask Chandrajit Banerjee, one of the big concerns, red flags that the survey highlights, of course, and this has been known for some time, is the lack of creation of jobs, particularly higher end jobs, good quality jobs, and more importantly, finding the young people who are employable in those jobs. And the government, in fact, recently released a stat that about 16.5 lakh jobs were lost just in the informal sector alone over the last 7 years. Even at 7% GDP growth rate, which is the higher end of what the survey is predicting, we may not be able to create the 10 million or 11 million jobs that are required every single year. How does industry, how does government, how do we plan to deal with this problem? We've got a huge demographic dividend that people are talking about, but it's no good if you're not able to create jobs for that demographic dividend.
So, I have 4 buckets on that, if I may. One, of course, yes, we need to create those jobs and high quality jobs, as you said. So one thing we have suggested is how do we really look at creating a sort of a scheme like, we did the PLI, the production linked incentive scheme. So similarly, if we can look at something called employment linked incentive scheme for a higher employment generation with a bias, of course, on women employment. So that's one big thing, is basically like an employment PLI and ELI, if one can say, to incentivize the job-intensive sectors, be it, say, areas like textiles or garments, or even non-manufacturing sectors like, the services sectors like tourism or even the healthcare sector. That's one bucket. Second, of course, the very important area is what you spoke about, is the mismatch. While you have X number of people required in the industry, there is still a gap and people want to employ, but you don't find the right type of people. Therefore, the skilling and the future of jobs and the future of skillings, that needs to be taken on a war footing. That again, where industry, the private sector, there is a public-private model which needs to be encouraged, to see how private sector can certify and train, which is equivalent to the national certification. The third piece is very important, is to really look at the MSME sector, because the large companies, there is going to be a lot of automation, but the employment sector is really going to be coming from the small and the mid-sized companies. So we have to create an environment where it becomes easier for the small and the mid-sized companies in terms of laws, etc., to be made more easier for them to do business. And my last point is,
okay,
there is a factor market reforms, like the labor market reforms, etc., which needs to be carried on through the states, which makes it easier to employ. So these are 4 buckets.
So let me ask Mr. Mukundan, one of the points that Mr. Banerjee referred to was the PLI scheme. And the PLI scheme has been there for the better part of 4 years now. It started right when COVID happened. And the assessment since the initiation in 2021, the PLI scheme has attracted investments worth over 1 lakh crore rupees. It's also led to net revenues and sales worth over 8 lakh crore rupees and about 6 lakh jobs. The question, though, is how long will the PLI have to be continued? And what is your assessment of the PLI schemes? And, of course, broad basing it, broad bucketing it, to not just talk about, creation of revenue or creation of sales, but also generation of employment.
Zaka, I think this whole piece around linking it to multiple factors, including what you mentioned in terms of generating revenue, generating employment, generating capital investment, I think is absolutely fine. I think there's nothing wrong with it. And the PLI scheme, we have to undertake sector by sector. If you really look at Ministry of Commerce, they've identified 8 sectors in which international trade is going to continue to increase. Take one example of defense. Worldwide defense spending is increasing. India has an opportunity to position itself, and there we have to link the MSME through trade policy into that sector fully. Green transition worldwide is going to happen. I think we have to help MSME, because if you want to be a long-term supplier to international market, we need to help them to get to a green, because those green standards will be applicable on them at some point of time. So this piece around linking our trade policy, MSME, and each one of these schemes around the whole piece around skilling the workforce, I think this needs to be completed like a triangle, and we need to approach them in a very integrated manner. And the last piece in this continued investment in infrastructure, because our competitiveness comes from two factors beyond labor, which I would say is logistics and power. I think on logistics, a lot of work has happened. On power, I think it is state by state approach. Again, I think there's a big opportunity as we transition to green power and green energy. So I think we need to move all these buckets. We have the right vectors in place. We need to continue the path. And I do agree that I think maybe there's a bit of a caution in this economic survey. And I think it's right that they exercise caution in the face of the let's say the environment around us. But look at the positives. You have fundamentally interest rates which will come down globally because they peaked already. Secondly, I think if you look at the overall issue related to the market demand, despite the problems around the world, you look at the oil price, energy costs, they are almost stabilized. So I think this is the right moment, and I think a government is making the right effort, and we'll have to just watch how this continuity sort of pulls along in the right direction to triangulate three things, which is MSME, jobs, and the international market, in addition to domestic market.
I do want to ask Vaishali Sinha because there was this point that was made in the survey about the big thrust and the expectation from the renewables sector. The survey says it is expecting investments to the tune of 30 lakh crores by the end of the decade, by 2030. Are we on track to attract that kind of investment? Are we on track to meet our targets of 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by the end of this decade? Because even today, let's say, for example, even on something like electric vehicles, while there is so much push in terms of encouraging people to go green, to go electric, what about infrastructure and capacity and charging points and so on and so forth? Are we on track both from an investment point of view and from a deliverables point of view to meet that target?
Yeah, hi. First of all, it's great to be on this show. And, it's definitely, it was good to see the financing of green figure in the Amrit Kal drivers. So, no, definitely, I think our sector is the third fastest growing, when you look at globally, we're the third fastest growing renewable energy sector. I think our country set very ambitious targets. And over the last decade, I think we've set a strong foundation for an enabling and an encouraging policy environment. Now if I look at, the amount of investments required till 2030, we're looking at about 0.5 trillion US dollars of investments, whether it is in the generation, whether it is in transmission or storage. We're looking at $300 billion for generation, about 100 billion each in transmission and storage. So I think we have a great sort of a base on which I think the private sector has to go and deliver. So till 22-23, we were doing, if I look at my sector, the renewable energy sector, 15 gigawatts year on year. We are looking at a target of 50 gigawatts now, beginning this year. And if we look at the bids, etc., I think they've been on track to sort of attract bids and investments for the private sector to be able to kind of get to work. So definitely, of course, a lot needs to be done in building the enabling sort of ecosystem and the infrastructure which is required. And that is something we would like to see, I guess, more incentives being provided. But more than anything, we'd like to see the private sector jump in and drive this sort of on the ground execution to be able to scale and do more, and especially across the country. State by state, we need more sort of subnational engagement in our sector for us to be to have the impact we need to see in this energy transition which our country is leading.
I want to ask Mr. Puri, one thing that you at CII have been sort of very happy about, particularly in the last 2 or 3 budgets, is the emphasis on capital expenditure. The last couple of budgets, it's been upwards of 10 lakh crores or thereabouts. How worried are you that this budget, particularly after the political mandate that came back in June and the pressure on the government to seemingly do something for various cross-sections of society, whether it is women, whether it is the poor, this huge emphasis on welfare schemes, if you will, that the capital expenditure might not be able to clock those record numbers of 10 lakh crore plus like we've seen in the last couple of years?
Let me start by saying that ultimately, the question, and that's an area that you spoke about also. It's about creating jobs. Ultimately, what the economy has to do is to generate good quality of jobs, and good quality of jobs comes through economic transformation. I think the two are not diverse from each other, and we know that if we kind of spend every dollar on creating or strengthening the productive capacity of the economy, the multipliers are tremendous, rather than just distribution. So the focus on creating productive capacity, I think, needs to continue, and it has multiple benefits. Besides creating immediate jobs and spurring consumption, it enhances competitiveness of the economy. It's also increasing the capacity of the economy. If we are to become, a 5 trillion economy, or then Viksit Bharat, the quantum of trade that has to flow through the infrastructure that we have, the kind of flow through that tourism needs to support, the kind of investments we need in rural infrastructure, whether it's for cold storage, warehousing, and so on and so forth, that itself has to multiply. So that is required for the economy to grow, for the economy to get competitive. And of course, it has the direct benefit of spurring consumption and jobs, which was the strategy earlier that the finance minister adopted. And we are seeing the benefits of that. That's how why the economy is doing well. That's why private sector investment has kicked in. Jobs are getting created. So I think when the objective is common, I think it makes, and we also have a demonstration that this strategy has worked. I think it's only appropriate that everybody aligns to that thinking, because that's the only way that the economy can grow. I'm not taking away from the fact that there is, of course, a need to provide some relief to some sections of society, the middle class, given that certain cost levels, and that's a trend globally. Costs have gone up globally. Yeah. India has, of course, managed it much better. The inflation in India has been much better controlled than anywhere in the world, and that's why we are doing so well.
Okay, so Mr. Banerjee,
let me just make two quick comments. I do also want to make a comment on jobs also before I close. So some relief at the income tax, some relief at the rural areas, whether it's PM Kisan or Manrega wages. And I just want to make one comment on jobs. That's a very important area that you touched upon. I think what is important also is the quality of employment and the incomes in the employment. So there, besides creating jobs, I think it's also about transforming the agriculture sector, because farm incomes have to improve. That will also have a multiplier effect on the economy, and the economic survey talked about it. Okay. The second is the quality of the jobs in the economy. Also, for example, you look at the gig workers is today, Niti Aayog estimates 1.5% of the workforce is gig workers. Now the labor codes that are pending, for example, they state the requirement for social security to be given to gig workers.
Okay.
Now, improve the quality of jobs. What I'm really trying to say that the reforms that are there, like even labor codes, are in the interest of all stakeholders. So it's a positive development, and I think we need to kind of talk about it, build consensus, and take it forward, because that's what's required to enhance the productive capacity of the economy.
Okay, so let me ask Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, one of the things, again, the survey sort of flags off is what is going forward going to be a new normal, if you will, about automation of jobs, about artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. Already we're seeing some effects of that in the IT sector and some of the high-end sectors. At CII, what would be your roadmap for how government and industry have to deal with this challenge? Because it, again, directly impacts the question that we've all been talking about jobs.
So, there will be an imperative and need for companies to digitally transform themselves, and that's going to be very, very critical. The larger companies, again, can do it and can do it with ease. They have the financial capability or credit availability to do that. So the question comes in where we need to look at how the smaller companies, the mid-sized companies are able to transition, because they would need to transition not only to survive, but also to be actually to be competitive. And for that, we need access to capital or access to credit at competitive rates for the small and the mid-sized companies. And even there is a role for institutions like ourselves to see how we are able to impart that type of capacity building in our small and mid-sized companies. So an enabling ecosystem, or in terms of credit availability, etc., and helping them to transition, and also the ecosystem that can be created by institutions. I would think that these two would be extremely critical to really for us to feature in the supply chain strongly, and to be globally relevant. My last point on that is green transition. That's again going to be very critical for our small and the mid-sized companies. And we have talked about, say, a green transition fund, which can be where private sector can participate in that fund to help, again, largely the small and the mid-sized companies.
All right. Mr. Mukundan, I'll give you the final word just in terms of how this story moves forward as far as manufacturing is concerned, because that's really where a large number of the jobs are going to be created. That's what we saw with China. That's what we saw with Korea. That's what we saw with most of the Asian tigers, the PLIs, the Make in India initiative. Where is it that you feel needs further impetus, further initiative, whether it is from government or from industry, to try and push more high-quality manufacturing jobs in the country?
So if you look at, if you heard today morning presentation which was made, it was actually very, very precise in terms of identifying some of the factors where we need to sort of improve efficiency, in terms of making land available, in terms of looking at, there was a detailed presentation on what is the ratio of land to building in Haryana versus other states. How can we release more land to release? I think that kind of detailed effort which has come out today, I thought was very, very welcoming. I think that the factor costs come down. I think manufacturing will become competitive. Then we can link our MSME to international markets. On AI, I want to tell you, Zaka, just going back to your previous question, I think we must look at AI as an enabler. I really think digital and AI, India is a supply constrained economy. AI and digital are the ones which will allow us to increase the supply. For example, take healthcare. People need access to healthcare. That quality of healthcare can be multiple times made available to everyone if we can use the power of these technologies. So I think we should not just be worried about what happens to jobs. We need new jobs. That's what the economic survey says. We need to reimagine. I think UPI is a classic example of reimagining the future. And I think we are at a very, very important cusp in terms of reimagining. But going back to your issue on manufacturing, I think it is small things, little things, which we need to improve in factors, including issues related to logistics, where I think a lot of improvement has happened, including power. I think if you look at power rates across states, there are various variations there. What can government do to work with states to make our industry competitive in the states which are already taking the strides ahead? I think it's very, very critical.
All right, Mr. Mugundan, Mr. Banerjee, Ms. Sinha, and Mr. Puri, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to your company again tomorrow once the budget is tabled, presented and tabled by the Finance Minister, budget for 24-25. It's going to be a very critical one, both from an economic point of view and also from a political point of view. It's the first budget in the third term of the Modi government, and of course, the opposition, the people will be looking at cues as to are there any corrective mechanisms or corrective measures that are going to be announced in the budget in a way that it reflects that the Modi government is heeded to the message of Mandate 2024. But I want to talk about the economic survey. It does paint some very bright spots as far as the Indian economy is concerned and does raise one or two red flags. I'm now joined by the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran. Thank you very much, Mr. Nageswaran, for joining us. I want to first ask you, the big headline, of course, from the survey is the GDP estimate of between 6.5% to 7%. Do you reckon this is a slightly conservative estimate? Because most other agencies, RBI, IMF, and other private agencies, of course, have tagged their estimate for GDP at 7% and above.
It is a prudent estimate. In fact, we were also one of the many agencies, so to speak, which had anticipated 7% back in February. We were more comfortable with that, but we simply are drawing attention to the incremental developments since then, which is that the global conflicts has remained protracted, number one. And number two, the monsoon progress has been patchy, with many key areas, grain producing areas, not receiving adequate rainfall. So the spatial distribution has been very uneven. That's a new development. And the third aspect that we are also focused on is how financial markets globally have been elevated, and they are now beginning to show some signs of cracking. And if that continues, it will have a spillover effect on emerging markets, including India's, especially those that have which have had a very good run in the last several years, and that will have its own implications for sentiment and consumption and spending on non-essential items, etc. And that is the reason why we feel we are not saying that it will be below 7. We are saying 6.5 to 7 is possible, but we will wait and see how the second quarter data come about, which is between July and September. And by then, if the momentum is still maintained, then obviously the chances of achieving 7% go up considerably.
One of the biggest concerns, and the survey flags this as well, in fact, it's probably the biggest concern, is the need to create jobs at a large scale. I think the survey's estimate is that India needs to be producing somewhere in the range of 78 plus lakhs every single year to try and meet this demographic dividend advantage that we have. I just want to know your thoughts on how does the country go about doing that? How does the government, how does the finance minister tomorrow in her budget address this question of creating enough jobs?
I don't. Yeah, I understand. I don't want to speculate on what the budget will contain on this. We are less than 24 hours away, so we can wait for the budget to be unwrapped and see see for ourselves. But what needs to be done is something that is what the survey goes into in detail in chapter on the labor and employment, and also in the chapter on the medium-term outlook, which is chapter 5. And the answers are not just with the union government. It is and it actually stresses the fact that there is a stakeholder engagement that is needed between union and state governments and the private sector, because much of the deregulation action that is required to facilitate job creation actually lies with the state and local governments. And academia and industry can collaborate on appropriate skilling initiatives. And industry also has to be conscious of the capital labor balance in its own business expansion plans, etc. So there are multiple ways in which this intervention needs to happen, and these things will manifest themselves apart from the fact that continued economic growth will have its own positive implications for job creation.
How concerned would you be also about the employability question? I think the survey does flag that almost 1 out of 2 new college graduates do not come through to the job market with the requisite employability or employable skills. How does, again, the government address that question and address that real concern?
I don't want to speculate on that. As I said, we are less than 24 hours away. You can wait for the budget to be unwrapped.
All right. We'll leave it at that, Mr. Anantha Nageswaran. We will be in touch with you, of course, as and when the finance minister presents her budget. We'll see how this plays out, particularly when it comes to the global growth constraints, as you had mentioned. If I can get just that final answer from him, because I think the survey does talk about the geopolitical risks. Again, how concerned should the government or the finance minister be vis-a-vis, high oil prices, the wars that you mentioned, the geopolitical risks that are still around?
Yeah, I mean, geopolitical risks, unfortunately, have not yet spilled over into adverse inflation outcomes, and we have to keep an eye on it. At the moment, we don't see that yet as a big factor, because the way the global economic growth is proceeding, that has its own restraining influence on demand growth, and therefore some supply disruptions on critical commodities, etc., can be absorbed without necessarily seeing its impact on prices.
All right. We'll leave it at that, Mr. Anantha Nageswaran. Thank you very much for joining us, the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, giving us his thoughts and perspective into what went into the creation of the economic survey and his estimates for where growth will be and where some of the key indicators, whether it's inflation, job creation, etc., will be, and what a tightrope walk the finance minister may have to walk tomorrow.